The reason they like reading my stuff is that I've always got real life examples to prove what I'm saying.
There's a lot of good people that listen to this podcast.
Other than God and my family, deer hunting would be next in line on my list of priorities.
From the bottom of our hearts, it's just fantastic and awesome to have the support that you guys are getting.
People ask me about expandable broadheads and love swings.
Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Osseo Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Chasing Giants podcast brought to you by Osseo Gear with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Don, September is here. We're recording late on Sunday night because I've been out sitting on an alfalfa field until dark. So I apologize in advance for everybody staying up late, waiting for this to air. They're going to have to get used to it now that hunting season is over. I promise you we'll have it by Monday morning, but no commitment on what time on Sunday.
Yeah, you've got to hunt. Season's been open there in Kentucky for 2 days now, and I don't think you hunted the first day, but I was almost expecting you to call and say, hey, I got a buck down, and we're not going to have to postpone that recording for a day.
Well, I'm telling you, I haven't been, as soon as I walked in the door, we started planning, and we did a good segment with Mark Luster, who's one of the Dream Team members, to do the buck forecast segment, and started recording that we'll splice in later into the show. But I haven't been on social media. My guess is that there were some good bucks killed tonight. If people were set up and had a place to hunt with a southeast wind, the conditions, I think, were really good. And meaning by that, if you watch the weather around Kentucky, we had really bad thunderstorms come through my part of the state last night, and I think we got an inch and a half of rain last night through this morning, and then it turned hot today. So that alfalfa was just absolutely busting today. And then we have another real serious thunderstorm coming through about midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. So I think all of those deer are up and we're feeding. A couple buddies of mine just texted me a little bit ago. But to put in perspective, I think I saw 24 doe and fawns and 7 bucks tonight. And I could just see alfalfa. I couldn't see the bean field, couldn't see anything else. So I'm sure there were more deer out tonight. I actually got out of the blind a little bit early because the bachelor group of bucks came out, and I knew that they weren't going to close enough ground to get to me in time for daylight, and the shooter that I was looking for wasn't out. So I slipped out probably about 10 minutes early tonight. But I want to first, before we talk about anything else, I want to first congratulate a few people. Our good buddy Brandon Epperson shot an awesome velvet buck opening day here in Kentucky. Brandon's been a good friend of ours for a long time. Great buck. I'm not sure if it's his biggest one yet, but great buck. He shot it.
Yeah, the buck was still in velvet. He shot it opening morning, didn't he? He ended his season real quick.
Yeah.
So
just basically a couple hours in the stand. He talked to me about the spot, and it was kind of one of those, he had a plan to actually get in there early, and he was still nervous about it. So I think they went in, I might be wrong, but I think he said they may have went in at 4 a.m. just to be safe. And sat there and had a cameraman with him. So I think he still films and helps with Arrow Wild, our friend John Mulligan. But I haven't seen the footage yet. I've seen the pictures of the buck. So really excited for Brandon. Another friend of ours, I don't think you've heard this one yet. I'm looking real quick to make sure they've posted pictures. I don't want to say something unless they've posted pictures yet. But our mutual friend Danny York. Do you remember Danny, Patrick Simpson's cousin?
I do remember Danny.
His daughter Haley shot a giant last night. She braved those thunderstorms, braver than me because I'm not getting out in those things. She shot a giant. Had another youth hunter kill a good one this morning. And one of our listeners, I'm not going to say anything because I just checked my phone. One of our listeners local that we've actually had his question on our podcast before, that lives really close to me, shot one tonight, and everybody say a quick prayer for him. They backed out and are waiting. Hopefully they get their hands on that deer, but it's another good one. So a friend of the Chasing Giants podcast shot one tonight. Hopefully I can share a picture of a local buddy of ours that has submitted questions with another big velvet buck. So I think this east wind has everybody a little screwed up. We're not used to east winds, and it switched just enough to the southeast where I could hunt tonight, or I'd be riding the pine 2 nights in a row.
Yeah. Well, east wind is my favorite. So they usually accompany a weather front, like just happened with you guys. But anyway, congrats to all those guys that have and gals that have been successful so far. I've seen a few pictures on social media of some really good bucks that were shot in the last 2 days.
Well, I know that listeners can appreciate where I'm coming from because, I still have never, as many early season bucks as I've shot. Most of my Kentucky bucks are shot in the month of September, and I've never shot a velvet buck. I've never even had an attempt at a shooter in velvet. And I'm not going to say I'm going to lower my standards to shoot a velvet buck, but I would like to do it one day. And this weekend is pretty much my only shot because next weekend I'm going to be recording the next 2 episodes from downtown Chicago. I have to relocate for my job to downtown Chicago of all places. And this was my only shot. And, that little voice in the side of your head that says you need to go with the wrong wind or you need to push it. I'm not going to say that one wasn't there. And, 10 years ago, I probably would have gone and still hunted. But the discipline that I think is kind of set this part of my journey aside really just came from watching you and saying, hey, it's not right. You're not going to deviate. Why educate that deer and never get a shot at it?
Mm-hmm. Well, you could burn your farm out in one weekend doing things wrong. So I think that's what a lot of people do. I know that's what a lot of people do. So I think you made the right move. The deer you're after will still be there when you get back.
So let's talk a little bit about fall food plots. We've been shipping a ton of the new Southern Blend fall blend out. We only have a few bags of that left in the 2022 pilot program at Real World. A lot of our buddies from down in the Southeast, Joe Miles, Josh Anderson, a bunch of our buddies down through there, Freeman Miller, I think, got some. So all of you guys that are Chasing Giants listeners, I've been getting updates. They're putting this in. We still have plenty of time, even for the Midwest. Everybody's getting a little antsy, but still plenty of time.
Yeah, and those Southern guys, they got another month or so. So if you're down in the South and you want to be part of that pilot program and see how this new blend does on your property, we still got a little bit, not a lot, but as long as it's still on the website, we've still got some.
So yesterday, I don't know if you got any additional planning done, but yesterday I was riding in the back of Patrick Simpson's side-by-side with my Extreme Blower Products blower blowing fall plot up in over top of his cornfield. And believe it or not, the 2 of us did something like that and neither one of us got hurt. So I think that's a win-win even before getting an inch of rain the night after we did it.
Wow, that's saying something. I recall a guy jumping off a tractor and breaking his ankle or something, or twisting his knee and having surgery.
Yeah, blowing my knee out and blowing my back out. So,
Yeah.
What about you? Did you get any fall plots done?
I got the last plots planted. I planted your plots at the least midweek, and then just when was it? Yesterday, I got the last plot in at my house. So we'd had a sunflower patch out here behind the new house, and I mowed them down here a couple weeks ago. And then our buddy Austin Razor came on Friday, and we trenched in a drain. There's a drain tile that runs through that plot that we had to tee into. So I didn't plant that plot till we got our work done, and so we did that on Friday, and then I planted that plot. So we got a little bit of rain last night and today, about a half an inch. So these fall plots are in fantastic shape here where I'm at. Plenty of moisture, regular rain, and I'm glad to be done with it.
Well, as a follow-up, I'm a little interested to hear about the pumpkins and the bag of topsoil, or you did that. So our listeners that are faithful following, somebody asked not too long ago for an update. You sprayed a residual, I believe, in one of your corner bean fields, and were worried
Yeah.
about planting pumpkins for the deer. So you took out a bag of potting soil and left it on top and planted it. How did that end up doing?
Well, what I did was I had some semi loads of black dirt brought in from my new
That's what it
yard
was.
around my
Yeah.
house. And I took some 5-gallon buckets of that black dirt and made some mounds to put the pumpkins in. And to be honest, Terry, I planted those pumpkins in the NutriCrave corn patch, and the corn got so big that I just forgot about. I mean, I didn't forget about them, but I haven't stomped through the corn to go check them out. So I need to do that this week. I have no idea. I might have pumpkins, the size of a Volkswagen out there, and that corn's hiding them, but I have no idea what's in there.
Well, speaking of NutriCrave corn, I've done some corn testing for Real World this year, and we've gotten all kinds of feedback. And we've actually come on this podcast and said that the yield is probably going to be less with NutriCrave corn, but I don't know if it just happens to be growing year or certain conditions. The feedback that we're getting right now has been the yield has been very impressive for this non-GMO corn.
Yeah, and I'm seeing it on Facebook, and I can't tell you how many of our customers have sent me pictures as well. I even seen an Instagram hunter from Kansas post some pictures saying that actually he posted a video saying that it might be 200 inch or 200 bushel, 200 bushel corn. So
I hope he's listening right now and he's laughing because I guess somebody
yeah,
accused him of being an Instagram hunter. So Don and
yeah,
I were laughing about that, but
he's got a new nickname.
yeah, it's funny that when you try to help people and educate you that the bashing comes from all different directions. So keep
Well,
doing
and
what you're doing.
this guy knows what he's doing when it comes to growing corn. It's what he does for a living. And
Yeah.
I'd mention his name, but I don't. After I calling him the Instagram hunter, I don't want people to catch on and have him get mad
No,
at us. But
but he knows
he knows what he's doing.
yeah, he knows who he is if he's listening right now. You keep doing what you're doing, and it's like you said, friends will be friends and loyalty lasts a long way. So don't change a thing. I think that you add a lot of value. I think I made a post or a comment on your Instagram. You not only educate on the farming side but also on the whitetail side. So let's pick your brain a little bit about a sensitive issue that comes out every year about this time, and that's EHD. We all cringe, especially after 2012 when all of us got to really know this virus and what it does to the whitetail herd. We were dry in many areas for most of the summer. Some areas were really wet. Have you heard of any outbreaks or anything going on up in your area?
I've even been looking on social media, and I hadn't heard much at all until yesterday. A friend of mine, only about probably 15, 20 miles from me, texted me and asked if I'd heard any reports, and I said no. Well, he was out scouting on 60 acres of private ground, and again, not that far from me, and they found 6 dead deer. And he said they'd all died in the last 10 days or so. They were all intact, they weren't rotted away totally. He figured they'd all died within the last week or 10 days, but there were 6 of them on 60 acres. The way he described it, some of them were along the creek and such, so it sounded like it was definitely EHD. But that's the first report that I've heard. And like you said, it's been where we're at, it's been wet all summer. June was kind of dry, but then right after the 4th of July, we started getting rain, and it has not been dry at all since.
Right.
So, I hope that's the only report I hear.
Yeah. I have not heard any either. It's just I don't know, Don. Maybe I'm wrong, but maybe I'm just watching more. but it sure seems like we have either 180-degree difference with people's weather not too far apart this year. Usually the Midwest seems a little bit more consistent with the amount of rain or drought. Good grief, one county over can be 180 degrees of what the other one had, with flash flooding to drought. So we've been really lucky here in Kentucky. But yeah, comment down below if you're watching on YouTube and you've heard of EHD outbreaks. Comment down below where you're from and where you've heard about it. I think it's going to be an interesting kind of sidebar as we navigate and continue to watch EHD as it relates to weather. And we still never circled back to what it was in 2012 and that hurricane. I'm still curious about that. If somebody knows when that hurricane actually landed and when all that EHD outbreak started happening, I think that's going to be an interesting topic as we move forward in the show. So I'm going to continue to hunt this week as much as I can. Tomorrow's supposed to be a wind again out of the east with thunderstorms. So again, I need a little bit of that southeast wind in order to hunt, but we'll play it by ear as we go. What do you got cooking for this coming week?
Well, I'm going to shift some cameras. I typically do that starting about Labor Day weekend. This year I kind of held back because there's just so many people off work, and I seem to anymore draw so much attention, everything I do. If people see me out and about on a back road or country road, they just naturally assume that I'm doing something with deer and I'm close to one of my hunting areas. So I kind of put that off till this week when everybody goes back to work. I'll be shifting cameras. But, speaking of the trail cameras, Terry, I made a post on social media yesterday about these bucks shifting their range.
Right.
And I seen the most interesting thing that probably in all my years of running trail cameras, I've never had anything like this happen. I've got about 50 or so trail cameras out at the moment. And I only, of those, only 6 of those were cell cams. And so those 6 are sending pictures to my phone, as they take the pictures. Well, it would have been yesterday morning. I got up and I started checking the pictures that were taken overnight that were on my phone. And I had 5 bucks out of 6 cameras. I had 5 bucks that were all at least 3.5 years old. And they were all the first time that I'd gotten those bucks pictures.
Were they hard-horned?
Some of them were.
Yeah.
I think probably two of the 5 and 3 were still in velvet. But these bucks had not been on those cameras all summer, and then boom, in one night, 5 bucks show up on new cameras. And I'm sure it's the fall shift as those bachelor groups are breaking up and then bucks are moving. But I've never seen it, like such a hard line where that many move at once. It's usually a gradual shift that starts about the 1st of September and goes into mid-October. But it's definitely underway from what I've seen. And then I made that post, and it was just amazing how many people commented after I made the post that they had seen the exact same thing on the exact same day.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept and I don't know that we'll ever really know, for sure what drives that, but I think the takeaway for hunters that might be discouraged right now because they don't have a shooter yet in historically good properties. I think having a little bit of patience right now, because if you're keeping intrusion down on your property right now and you've done due diligence as far as your habitat, stuff can show up as the shift happens. It's not the end of the world right now. And then, you always got late season too. If something doesn't show up after the shift, if you have the food there, you're going to be drawing them late season. So, but I do think that it will be interesting to see how much more of this you find when you shift your cameras, whether those bucks have already gone or still continue to move through the first, second week of October.
Yeah. And most of them move before October, but there's always a few that we see it here in Illinois. That first couple of weeks of October, you can have 4 or 5 bucks come by you at once. that are still hanging together. I've had it happen to me numerous times. So some of the bachelor groups or individual bucks are just a little bit slower to break out of their group and take off for their fall range.
Yeah, but it's interesting now you have to, July 4th and then this weekend, holiday weekend, has always been big trail camera weekends for you. You having to change your methodology just so people don't see you. I bet you're burning up that Quiet Cat bike up and down the road so people can't see where you're at.
Well, yeah, it's just part of it that yeah, I kind of brought it on myself, so I'm not complaining. But I'd go out of my way to keep a low profile anymore, and still, somebody sees me, they pretty much know I'm after big deer 365 days a year. So if they see me on a back road, they're just assuming that I'm pretty close to someplace I'm hunting.
That's no different than me. It's we laugh that, I can't even talk specifics about the deer that I'm after in Kentucky this year because he's got specific character, and as soon as I say something about it, the neighbors are going to know, and they're not sharing their secret intel with me. Why do I want to share it with them? So,
Yep.
like I said, it's you guys will see pictures of it when he's got fake eyes in, and we're getting Steve Shields to take good photography pictures of him. So,
Yep. Loose lips sink ships.
well, I'm really excited for people to get to listen to Mark Luster. We recorded this segment a little bit ago before we started recording, and Mark is a part of the new Dream Team consulting group that you put together out of Iowa. He's going to be traveling anywhere, though, where I'm kind of limiting my circle of where I'm going to go. Mark will go just about anywhere. I really respect the fact that he's given his whole professional career as a law enforcement and military veteran to our country. So we want to thank him for that. But most of all, he is a big buck killing machine. And I started hearing the name of Mark Luster back years ago with Drury. And I know you've been friends with him for a long time. So for the people who are watching on YouTube right now, we were not able to capture this segment on video. So we're just going to show some pictures of Mark with his bucks in the past and have that up on the screen for the segment. And then we'll come back to the video when Don and I answer questions from our listeners. So stay tuned. After a spot from our primary sponsor and friends at Osseo Gear.
Osseo Gear introduces a premium line of bow hunting gear that is unmatched, pairing nature's finest camouflage with the best technological innovations. Osseo Gear brings whitetail bow hunters the gear they need to be the best at their craft. The unique camouflage mimics the intricate feather pattern of North America's greatest predatory creatures. Designed for invisibility, built for comfort, and engineered for function. Visit OsseoGear.com. That's ASIO Gear.com to start shopping. Osseo Gear. Prepare to be invisible.
All right, well, welcome to this portion of the Chasing Giants podcast where we're preparing for Don's buck forecast. And since this is episode 133 on September 4th, Don decided to bring on Dream Team member Mark Luster onto the podcast to talk about what his observations have been in early season scouting and trail camera running. So Mark's on the phone with us, but before we let Mark talk, I thought, Don, why don't you just jump in here and tee it up a little bit as far as Mark Luster, who he is to you, and why he's a Dream Team member.
Well, I've known Mark for probably 15 or 20 years, maybe longer than that. I don't know. Don't even remember the first time I met him. That's how long I've known him. But he's a guy like me that's just absolutely crazy about big deer. In fact, he's so crazy about big deer that he left his home in Illinois and moved his family to Iowa just to pursue giants. And, the thing about Mark, like everybody on the Dream Team, first of all, his integrity. If Mark tells me something, I know it's true, and I know that when he goes out to meet with clients, he's not going to do anything to embarrass me. I mean, he's a first-class person, former military, which I deeply respect. But his whitetail knowledge, I mean, I've said many times, posted it on social media even, that I think Mark is probably one of the top 5 whitetail hunters in the world today. And, I don't know how many booners he's killed, but I know he's killed, at least one over 200, but just countless booners. And, and the thing about it is he wasn't born with a silver spoon. He doesn't even own his own hunting property. He's went out and knocked on doors for permission and basically did it the hard way. So I got a lot of respect for him and really happy to have him as part of the dream team. And I think any client that hires him is going to be real happy with him.
Well, Mark, welcome to the podcast. I guess to kick it off, what's it like to have a guy like Don Higgins talk to you about being one of the top 5 deer hunters in the country?
Well, it's funny you say that. I mean, Don has actually said that, like you said, many times over the last year or so, or two even. And it's pretty humbling coming from somebody like Don. He's quite respected and has done very well for himself. So, having those words of praise, if you will, coming from somebody like Don's pretty humbling.
Well, I know you're no stranger to podcasts and different online medias, but the Chasing Giants podcast is a little bit different. We have a lot of viewers that just listen on Apple Podcasts. We have a lot that watch on YouTube. And then we have a lot of our Amish and Mennonite friends that listen on call-in services. So for the people that's watching on YouTube right now, I'm going to just filter and rotate some of Mark's big bucks up on the screen that you're watching right now. So you'll be able to see that. But for the other people, I think we need to get a perspective just to get a little bit of a grasp about your style of hunting, the bucks you're looking for. Tee us up just a little bit about your hunting, and I hate it to make it a resume, but talk a little bit about your journey in the whitetail woods and what you're after when you're looking for whitetails and where you hunt them at.
Okay, wow, that's a lot to remember, but I'll try to get through that. So background wise. Obviously out of high school, did a little college, and then I enlisted into the Marine Corps, 1st Battalion, 9th Marines, infantry unit. Did 2 tours overseas, got back, and I was stationed out at Camp Hill in California. That being said, taken away from the deer hunting side of things. I grew up deer hunting, but it was, we're talking about the 80s and so on. So kind of in Illinois, just heyday of giant deer. Although I never took any of those in the 80s. But then in the early 90s, when I went to the Marine Corps, I was pulled away from it. And you don't know how much you miss something or how much it's in your DNA until it's removed from, you're removed from
Sure.
it. So when I came back, I couldn't get enough of it. And I was, every book, every magazine, everything I could read, absorb, I was a sponge for it. And actually Don has a lot. I actually remember our very first conversation, about, mine and Don's very first conversation actually was me, sending him, and I want to say it was an email that I got off of his book, but there was a particular deer, he might not even remember this. I don't know that we've covered this, but there was a particular deer that I killed while I was filming Hunting with Drury Outdoors, Dozer, 2 years before I actually harvested him. I emailed Don and said, hey, this is who I am, and so on and so forth. So that was 2005, actually, Don. So that's how long it's been. So I guess that's 17 or 18 years. And I kind of just laid it out to Don, and just this goes to Don's character, but he got right back to me and said, hey, how are you doing? And kind of, I gave him a brief synopsis about my dad's property or whatnot. And he's like, I think you ought to, try these things and see how that takes you. And a lot of his, advice was to create a central sanctuary and bounce in. And I literally took that piece of advice and molded my own way and style of hunting around that, and in the consulting things that I have been doing so far, one little analogy that I do is I just ask the person, if you walk home, if you come into your home and somebody's sitting in your living room on your couch, are you going to know it? Well, obviously you will. That's your home. You know there's somebody's in your home, and you're going to know it. But if little mama had told you, hey, I need you to take the trash out tonight because the trash truck comes tomorrow, would you notice if somebody's hiding behind your back door? Well, you're probably not going to know that. And my clients, I try to tell them, be that person, be that guy that's hiding behind the back door. You don't have to get into his house. Leave him alone in his house because he's going to know you was there. Be the guy hiding behind the back door. And that's how we mold our properties, in that kind of a mindset of being invisible and just I don't have to get him in his house. He has to leave at times. Right. And get those in those predictable tight pinches, places that you can predict that person or, in our scenario, deer to be.
What a great analogy of stuff that we talk about every week, right, Don?
Yeah. Hey, you can see why I'm so excited to have Mark on board, because he thinks like we do, and his success didn't come because he had access to the best ground around. His success come because of his mindset and how he approaches the game. And the other thing that I really appreciate about Mark is that he's always chasing a giant. He goes where the giants are, and he may not be hunting the same piece of ground this year that he was last year, because he goes where the biggest buck he can find is. And that's very similar to what I do.
You are so right, Don. So and that's something that anybody can do. If there is someone that most anybody in this country can relate to, or how someone does something, much like you said, I own 20 acres. That's my spreads 20 acres, and that's just been in the last 6-7 years. That I've had it, but most of the time it's knocking on doors, gaining permission, or family ground. My dad, had 320 acres and whatnot, but it's gaining permission or a lease or something. I work for the Illinois Department of Corrections. From humble beginnings, if you will. It got to the point where a lot of times, and I'm certain all of you have probably dealt with this, you go knock on the doors and get permission on a property, and then you go whack a Boone and Crockett deer off of there. People that originally were okay with you hunting there are no longer okay with you hunting there.
Great point. Great point.
So then you turn around and now you're fresh out of that property again. You have to start over. So a lot of years I'm having to hunt fresh on a new farm and learn something. And so then I just kind of, took the lemons and made lemonade out of it. My style of hunting, if you will, is learning, how a deer, especially a mature buck, will use via aerial and topographical maps. And I've honed my skill, if you will, by being able to read them the best I can. It's not always 100%, but you can, I've found that I can at least get very close in where they're going to be when they leave their house, so to speak. So, and I've got friends that have been very successful in, harvesting their biggest deer every year during that, quote unquote October lull. And then others are later in November. Each person has their own way, so to speak. And I'm not saying that my way is the only way by any stretch of the imagination, but just by what's that adage that necessity breeds invention, so to speak. I basically have honed my way, how I have it, and that leads to me having my best success in that late October through first 10 days or 8 days of November. Kind of what I believe is to be the best time, and I say this a lot too, and to clients, to kill the deer. It's kind of before every deer's up, and you could kill the deer that your neighbor 2 miles away had. That now they're stretching their legs and walking everywhere, but their testosterone levels are up high enough that they just can't sit there all day long. They got to go check that food plot or that field or whatnot before dark, or they get themselves caught up, making scrapes and rubs and stuff on their way back to bed. And now all of a sudden they're 30 minutes after daylight rather than 30 minutes before daylight, killing that deer you've been getting pictures of ever since, this little fall shift, I think, that we're actually seeing has taken place. Once, like this time through October, you start getting those deer once they went hard horn, that kind of, bam, this is what I'm going to call home this fall. Those pictures, those deer, that late October to early November, right in there, those deer are the ones that I've been the most successful in harvesting.
Well, but the thing that I like and am honored to be part of this dream team is if anybody can say that this isn't a diverse group of guys that try to get it done, that anybody can do what we're doing. And Don and I say it on the, none of us that I know of are setting on 1,000 acres that we can manage. It's all small properties, permission properties, wherever we can try to get it. And boy, we've never talked about that on this podcast before, but I think it's happened to all of us. The first time you get a permission property and you kill a stud on it, guess what? That's the last year you're able to hunt it.
I'm not joking.
Oh my goodness! It's like starting over all over again after you kill a good one. Well, I want to shift gears here just for a little bit and tell you about when I first heard the name Mark Luster, and you mentioned it earlier, and that's the story of Dozer. I remember that episode of Drury Outdoors and that story. What did that buck, just in perspective for people who don't know, and I'm going to probably misstate this, but I think he was like 209, 210, something like that. Is that a correct statement?
No, the Dozer buck was like 180 and 3/8, I believe, is what he was.
I'm getting confused. We'll have to edit that.
Now Zeus was 209. Yeah.
Okay, I knew there was a 209 in there somewhere. So
that was 2 years ago.
Okay, so that was 2 years ago, but Dozer was the one on Drury, right?
Yep.
Was Dozer on Drury?
Dozer was on Drury. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, he was. And don't get me wrong, he still to this day, it's the biggest framed deer I've ever killed.
Well, Dozer's the one that I remember. What did that buck in your career of chasing whitetails, what did that do for you? Not from a career standpoint, but from a passion standpoint. This is all of a sudden a targeted buck that I think you'd chase this deer for multiple years, manipulated property, manipulated strategy. From just a journey standpoint, forget every household in North America that watched the Outdoor Channel now knows Mark Luster. What did it do for you from a passion standpoint?
Oh, it might as well have been lava. I mean, it started the fire. Because anybody that has hunted a deer year after year can relate. Like even in what they call the hero part of that video, I talk about it. I knew that deer more years than I'd known my 5-year-old son. I'd known that deer for 6 years. I had there's more sleepless nights about that. That one deer taught me more lessons than anything. And literally, quite literally, that deer forged Don and my friendship, because it wore me out. That deer wore me out to the point of where I literally sent an email to a guy I'd never talked to in my life and said, "Hey, can you help me?"
Just completely sucked you in.
Yeah, this deer is beating me at every corner. I mean, I'm here playing checkers, and this boy's playing chess. You know, right. He just wore me out. And like I said, what's funny is that Don's advice, and I don't know that we've ever actually talked about this, but it helped me in more ways than you possibly could know, because I at that point, I think I was just running rampant all over the farm, trying to just hang stands, trying to figure him out, and not knowing what I was doing that well. I thought prior to this deer that I kind of was getting the hang of things, but then he just beat me at every corner. And then Don's like, hey, step back, less is more, and it made me start looking at things from a completely different perspective. And then when I finally harvested that deer, it's kind of funny. 2 days prior to that, my brother had sent me a text and said, "Hey, I see this giant white deer out in the field there by Dad's house." And then the day before, my dad did. And both of them said, "Hey, this deer is out there kind of harassing a doe with triplets." Now, we're talking about those 2 days was October 23rd and October 24th. So early, And at this time, I knew Dozer was 8.5 years old. And I'd known that doe for several years, or at least I presumed that I did, just because she had triplets every year. So I'm like, I'm just going to go. My thought process was, hey, this buck has been on this farm for 8.5 years. That doe has been on this farm for nearly as much. And I'm thinking that he knows that she possibly is one of the first does to cycle in. He's known her practically his whole life.
Right.
So I thought, well, I'm going to go set up and try to harvest her, basically thinking that maybe lightning will strike 3 times in the same place. I mean, maybe he is just checking her every night because he knows she's the one that pops in first. And I mean, and that's the thing. And so I shot him on an October 25th. So pretty early, in the year that way. And I shot him. We went, we backed out for a minute, got the 4-wheeler stuff. I thought I had made a pretty good shot on him. We tracked him, got him out, did all the filming stuff, had him in the back of the truck up at the house, and it still wasn't done. Like it was, I think 4:45 or something like that. That was before time changed that I shot him. Like he was there early, It was one of those. I just think that he knew that doe, and he knew that she was one that cycles in early. And then Don might know this if he kept really, really good records. And I guess I've never asked him about this either. But when you did have a deer farm, Don, were particular singular does, did they normally cycle around the same time, like earlier than others?
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked about that before on this podcast. That there were certain does that, well, we talk about bucks, same time, same place, how they'll show up at the same place, at the same time, season after season. Well, with some of those does, they're going to come into heat at like almost the same date, within 24 hours. And my theory is, that what triggers that heat is the pineal gland in the corner of their eye that measures the daylight. And I don't know if different does have, different sizes or shapes of pineal gland or what, but whatever it is, they register daylight, and one doe may register it a little bit different than another. And without a doubt, some individual does will come into heat on the same day every year.
I wish that we were all smart enough to figure this out and plan it. But folks listening are just sitting there saying, this is the Higgins kind of, this is another guy that aligns with the exact same stuff that Don talks about all the time. Lack of intrusion, same time, same place. And they didn't even talk about it ahead of time. So we're going to talk a little bit about how people can learn more about Mark Luster and contact you in a minute, but let's get to the thing at hand right now, Mark. How many states are you running, and what states are they that you are running trail cameras or have people observing or helping scout? Because I know you're opening weekend in Kentucky right now. You're not too far away from me. I think you're probably an hour and a half from me right now. So where are you monitoring deer at right now for this year?
Kentucky, Illinois, and Iowa.
Okay.
Is my three current ones. My brother does have some ground, at least in Nebraska. That he's gave me an invite, but we'll see how that goes.
So I know
I
we were talking a little bit before we came on air and started recording. You're a big car nut. And for everybody out there, he races Fords people. You got to realize he's a Ford guy. I'm just kidding. He's not a Ford guy.
Oh my gosh, no.
That's like calling you a Democrat.
But, yes, it is.
For all those people that don't know Mark, he's a big Chevy guy. He's going to be in Bowling Green, Kentucky later in a few days, but he came to Kentucky early to hunt opening weekend and a few extra days in Kentucky. And, when you're coming on these quick trips and stuff, there's a difference in looking for age structure and there's a difference in looking at size. So for the sake of this podcast, Don and I are focusing on the buck forecast as size of antlers. I know that you're always tracking older deer, mature deer, but what are you seeing with your observations, whether it's driving around looking at bean fields, trail cameras, word of mouth? What are you seeing as far as size of bucks that you think have the potential to be harvested this year?
Here in Kentucky, the farm I'm on, it's permission. It's 100% permission piece. We're currently, haven't got any pictures of anything above 150s, early 150s, 151 or 2, that are mature. There's one that's probably a mid 50s deer, but he's not mature enough. And again, I just refuse to forsake my morals for the sake of a harvest, I guess. And that was the way it was when I was filming. It's kind of funny that, a lot of people that I did talk to at the shows and so on and so forth were like, man, you pass up these great deer, but if they're not of age, then I just don't want to harvest them. If I let them go, they have a chance. If I shoot them, they have no chance. So, I would much rather shoot an 8-year-old 130 as a 4-year-old, 160. I know that sounds silly to some people, but I just, age to me is king, especially in other states. Now at home, typically I just will not pick up my bow unless it's north of 170 and what I believe is 5.5 years old. And then I will, unless I'm, trying to, do a management buck that I'm trying to get out, or something on, and typically I'll do that on my own personal ground, that 20 acres. But that being said, so here I haven't got anything above 150s. Now the landowner is claiming he's seen a really big one a few times. So I'm hoping he shows up, but he has not as of yet on camera. At home in Iowa, on the other hand, and then anybody that has followed me, I can't say this at 100%, but almost 100%. But anybody that's followed me in 2018, there was a 4-year-old, 3 or 4-year-old that I passed that was like, I thought was 150 or 155. It was a kind of a bigger 9-point with double split brows and big wide framey sucker. That being said, and he was walking in a foggy morning, I think it was like November 2nd, and I passed him up at like 5 or 6 yards. That deer, after that season, I passed him up several times that season, and then after that season, he kind of went on the vine on me, kind of disappeared. And I think he just showed back up. It looks exactly frame-wise like him, just the supersized version. He's got 16 points, I think is what it is. And I think he's a 210 maybe, something like that. But again, I must say that for the last few years, he's kind of disappeared on me. So, we're going to see how things happen once the velvet comes off, and let's see if he stays. Or I just have a feeling that he's been living on the neighbors now, and I just haven't got much of him. And then we have another one that we've got 3 years history of now. At 3.5, he's he's actually 8-point with big brows. At 3.5, the brows are probably a foot long.
Holy cow.
And he had a fork on one side. And then last year, at 4.5, he was a 10 with double forks, and the one fork was really deep. And he actually, the neighbor picked up that shed, and that left brow was 15 6/8, I believe it was. Just the longest brow deer I've ever seen. And then this year, he showed up and he just blew up. I believe that he will crawl. I want to see better pictures, but I'm scared to throw stupid numbers out there because it's hard to believe this. When everybody's dream is to kill a 200-inch deer. My dreams, and I was lucky enough to do that. But my dreams were never so big as it be 200 typical. Right. I think my mind didn't go up to that level on the elevator. I think this deer will do that. This other one too. I really believe he's a 200 typical with like a 10-inch fork in his brow and a couple of what looks like inside time. So he rings up the clock pretty high.
Well, Don, listening to this, I mean, there's a lot of people that tell you that they see giants or they see really big deer. When Mark Luster says that he sees a big deer, it carries a little bit more weight, right? As you're hearing all the feedback around all the people that you're connected with, hearing Mark say this means a little bit different with your observations, right?
Well, if he tells me it scores 210, it probably scores 220. That's just, and the deer that he's talking about, he shared a picture with me. At least I think it's the same deer, at least the way he described it. And he's every bit that big. He doesn't even look real. He looks like a cartoon character. That's how big his rack is, but huge frame. But whatever Mark tells me, I know it's at least that big.
Well, and the purpose of this segment is just to get other people's feedback outside of Don's. Don's running cameras on Illinois and Ohio. I'm running on Illinois and Kentucky. Wes is running on Indiana and Kentucky. You're running on Iowa, Illinois, Kentucky. So it's just another data point for those people that there are giants out there, that there are potentials out there. So just another, like I said, just another data point that before Don makes his buck forecast for the year. Now, Mark, I know that this isn't the purpose of it, but being named part of Don's dream team, you're going to be doing consulting. I think if people want to learn more about Mark Luster, obviously, just a simple Google search is always productive. I think you did a whitetail cribs episodes with Exodus trail cameras where you gave a tour of all your deer and talked, obviously, the juries. But real quick, like for instance, I'm only traveling an hour or two away from my house doing just a very few how open are you to travel, and how far will you go if somebody wants to contact you for consulting?
Honestly, I have yet to find a distance I won't go.
Okay.
so I'll go pretty much anywhere. I'm not going to inhibit, I guess, myself or anyone to a local area. I will reach out for about as far as anyone wants to go.
All right. So if you want to learn more about Mark Luster coming to your property to help you set it up, you got to remember this, guys. It's hunting permission properties, small acreages. I know you've recently done seminars on how to hold, attract, and hunt bucks on small acreages. So a lot of experience and knowledge on those. So you can go to Higgins Outdoors webpage, or Mark, I'll let you tee it up, how people can contact you if they're interested in hiring you or talking to you about consulting. Where do they get a hold of you at?
My phone is always on, 217-320-1285. And they can also get a hold of me via email. It's Luster Mark. That's LUSTERMARK 155 @gmail.com.
All right. So thanks for being on the podcast, Mark. You did great. I know you're no stranger to being in front of the camera or behind the mic on these things. We'll have to bring you back on maybe later in the year and spin off a little bit of Don's Rut Report and kind of see the movement and activity that you're seeing in the field in your different hunting spots for everybody to listen to. But Don, do you got any closing comments before we let Mark go?
Yeah, I got a Mark Luster story that I think would be very interesting for our listeners.
Oh,
and Mark's going to remember this. A few years back, Mark and I were together. We went on a little trip. We went up to Jim Thome, the Hall of Fame baseball player. He's a big deer hunter. And Mark and I went to Jim's farm. At that time, I was doing a lot of habitat work, planting trees and such on habitat projects. And I think Mark made the introduction to me, or to me and Jim Thome. And but anyway, on this trip, Jim wasn't around, so Mark kind of took the ball and took me up, showed me his farm. But on the way back, we had this conversation, and I know Mark's going to remember it. He's probably laughing now. This is where I got a lot of respect for Mark, because being that he's been in the military and he's been a prison guard for many years. He's seen some of the worst society has to offer, but we was talking about what a mess the world was becoming, and that was before it really fell apart here in the last few years. But Mark shared the plan with me when it hits the fan, so how we can rid society of a bunch of I don't know what you want to call them, vermin. And Mark shared this story with me, or this plan. I mean, he's got a plan now, folks. He has absolutely got a plan. And I'm telling you, when it hits the fan, I want Mark on my side, because he's gonna solve the world's problems.
It was a foolproof plan, isn't it?
I'm not going to go into details. We'll probably get the FCC will probably kick us off the air.
We'll definitely get hit by the YouTube police on that one. So
no doubt about it.
Well, Mark can Mark can also outline that plan when he's there doing your consulting. How about that? So
there you go. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Details. Well, here's the beauty about that plan. I won't get into details about it, but essentially, you won't actually have to hardly do anything but a little bit of construction work. Yeah. Other than that, it's over. you let vermin do what vermin do, and the problem will solve itself. Let's just go like that.
All right.
Yeah. Is that a good enough synopsis, Don? Do you think that's
perfect? That's absolutely perfect.
All right. Well, thanks for being on, Mark. Contact Mark if you're interested, and we'll have him on. Go out, and if you have access to YouTube or any of the other social media platforms, follow Mark. Obviously, all of his contact info is on the Higgins Outdoors website. But we'll move on to the listener submitted questions of the podcast, starting right now.
Well, Don, after listening to that segment with Mark Luster, it's almost like he's been to your master classes, read your books. You guys have kind of run parallel as acquaintances, but Wes and I have you've been our mentor through the whole thing. So we've kind of learned firsthand. This guy's done it on his own and navigated right back into almost the same techniques and strategies that you live by.
Yeah, well, as we talked about on the interview with Mark, he wasn't born with a silver spoon. He learned the hard way like I did, and anybody that takes that approach, you either figure it out or you don't. And there's certain things that are not optional. There's certain things you got to do, and Mark's figured that out. He drops giants on a regular basis, and I have no doubt he's going to drop a whole bunch more.
But the people that are doing these consulting jobs are representing the Higgins Outdoors brand that you've worked your whole life to establish. So it's not just a fly by night idea on how we put a business plan together. You truly have tried to partner with people in this venture to get more resources to hunters and land managers, but yet maintain the integrity, because every single one of these plans has your stamp of approval on it. So you're not willing to just do that for anybody.
Yeah, and over the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've reached out to the clients that I had on my list, to be able to visit. And I just had way too many that I could handle. This thing snowballed like I didn't see coming, and the only option was to bring some more people on board. And I want everybody to recognize the fact that these are folks that I know. I've known them for years. I trust them. And then, like you said, Terry, every plan that you guys put together, I'm going to review it before the client ever sees it. And if I see anything that I've got questions about, I'm going to ask the consultant first, and why did you do this or why did you do that? And then when I'm happy with it, the client will get a copy of it. But, I've had a couple people kind of upset that they were on my list, and then I raised my price. But, I, I just hate upsetting anyone. The only reason I'm in the position I am today is because of good people that believed in me. But folks, I'm pushing 60 years old and I'm slowing down. The master class that we're going to do this year, it very well may be the last time that we ever have a master class this coming spring. I've got to give some things up. I can't continue to go for 4 or 5 months in the winter and never be home. And there's been projects here on my own property that have been, tossed to the side as I'm out consulting for others. Just time away from family. And, physically, I'm just not in the shape that I was before COVID. My lungs are just about beat. I can't hardly walk across flat ground without catching my breath. And a lot of these properties are in rougher terrain. And my apologies to anyone that's offended, but we're going to do the best that we can to get you the best plan possible for your property.
And, we're always going to take heat from different people, just like, we were laughing about our friend in Kansas that took heat about being an Instagram hunter. But, the bottom line is the price was set there to minimize the number of people, and people don't see that the projects that you're going to be taking on, for the most part, are much larger scale projects. We talk about this project you're doing down in Mississippi. That's a multiple year project, and that's the stuff that you're going to be focusing on, while we help be more of, I don't want to say site evaluators, but we're going to be more of the infantry out in the field, trying to bring the Higgins plan to everybody. So I hope that makes sense. And I know people are going to be upset, and there's nothing we can do, but our family faith and beliefs in what we do have to still fall in line with what we need to be as men and husbands and fathers and grandfathers. So we hope that everybody understands that we're trying to navigate that the best we can. So that COVID thing's an interesting spin. We had a good conference call with Quiet Cat this week, and the fact of you relying on that bike. Not many people were talking about this, but we're going to be sharing more about this story through the season. To my knowledge, I haven't had COVID yet, but you've had it now, we think twice, and your ability just to walk even long distances across softer ground or anything just isn't there. So it's an interesting spin that we're going to try to help tell the story of that later this year, and using equipment like Quiet Cat just to navigate that.
Yeah, that Quiet Cat's become quite the tool for me. If I've got a long walk, even across an open ag field that's fairly flat, without that bike, I'd be taking, several breaks just to stop and catch my breath. The Quiet Cat lets me get there a lot faster. I'm not out of breath. I'm not working up a sweat, and I'm not leaving ground scent even. I just drive right to the base of my tree, lean that bike over, lay it in the weeds, whatever, and climb up. And it's allowed me to continue to hunt as hard as I was previously. And without it, I don't know that I could get to all the stands that I get to.
Yeah. So anyway, just an interesting spin on the technology with those bikes, and we'll have more on that. So let's move on. That segment from Mark was a little longer than what we originally anticipated, but there's nothing in there I really want to even cut out. So I think that was a good segment, and people will get to know Mark a little bit better. We'll probably have him back on during the Rut Report segment of the year just to hear what he's seeing. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the first question of the week and share that with my screen for you.
Okay, the first question comes from Tim Hallonen from Howell, Michigan. It says, hello, Don and Terry. Great job on the podcast, and keep fighting the good fight. After society continues to crumble, it may be fashionable to be men of faith again someday. Anyway, my question relates to hunting small properties, say 15 acres. Generally speaking, we want to approach our properties on the downwind side, so we blow our scent into our neighbors and never into ours, and never into bedding areas, etc. However, on that small of a property, we can't always get them to bed on us, always, and if we're going too far into our property, we're inevitably blowing scent into the bedding on our neighbors, and thus educating deer. I've come to realize if I can only hunt one stand on one wind and never get busted, but that's it. It's extremely hard to not hunt the iffy stands, which brings me to another question. If the deer are bedded 300 yards away and I have to blow my wind through them to get downwind of where they'll come past me in my food plots, is that far enough that I could skate by them without them busting me? I do practice religious scent control, and it appears to me that when I do this, deer sightings from that direction do fall substantially. Just having a hard time coming to grips with the fact that if I'm going to shoot anywhere near mature bucks, I might be limited to one wind and one, maybe two stands. Thanks. Well, Tim, there's a reason that I picked your question. It's because I run into this situation a lot on consulting visits. And I remember one particular visit on a Kentucky property last year, where I just had the hardest time getting this client to accept the fact that his property did not lay out good for a couple of different wind directions. And you entered that property from the west, and there was just no good west wind stands on that farm.
Which was probably the predominant wind.
Exactly. And I in my own hunting, in this question, Tim's talking about a property of 15 acres. Well, absolutely. I've got lots of properties bigger than 15 acres where I've got one stand or maybe two stands. I've got lots of properties where I got one stand and I've got one wind direction I can hunt. But guess what? If I stay away and am disciplined, like Terry was talking about earlier, and I only hunt it when that wind is right, when the conditions are right, then my odds of success are way better than if I try to get a stand or 4 or 5 stands for every wind. It just doesn't work that way, and you just end up burning out your property. And Tim even said that when he tries, even with his religious scent control that he references, he still sees a whole lot less deer when he's blowing his scent into the bedding area 300 yards away. Those deer can smell you a lot farther than 300 yards. I know for certain. But you just you gotta take, in some instances, you gotta take what the property gives you. Now, when we go consult on a property, we're going to do everything we can to come up with, unique ways to get to stands. Um, maybe create access trails on the perimeter of a property or something. But even with that, most properties, especially small properties, you're not going to be able to hunt every wind direction. Take what that property gives you and don't push it. When you push it is when you just burn out your property and then you're done.
I think people get scared of small properties, and I think small properties, we we just heard from our guest earlier. Small properties are maybe the key to finding a giant. And I think there's another question that's coming up later that I don't want to spoil if we get to it. But people shy away from small properties, but you just have to, I think you have to utilize small properties for what they're made for, and that's a very specific situation if a mature buck is there. It's not something that we're going to be able to burn up to take a bunch of kids hunting to kill a bunch of does on. If that's what you want to do with that property, that's fine. But what you just said is take what the property will give you. To me, that means a little bit more than just the wind direction. I mean, it's total intrusion. And you can absolutely, as more people are hunting, the kicker in all of this is you can rely on small properties to hold giants. That 6.5-year-old buck that I killed 2 years ago in Kentucky, he was on 20 acres, and I held him there because he was bedded there. I mean, I'm sure he left, but I was able to hunt him because he bedded there. But I could only hunt that deer with one wind, so it's just fewer times in there, less intrusion, less activity. Small properties can be phenomenal, but you just have to change your mentality around the small property.
Yeah, well said, Terry.
All right, well, let's move on to the second question of the night. Let me share this. If I saw you getting awful close to the camera there for a second, so I'll try to blow it up as big as I can. I don't want everybody seeing your nose hairs.
Well, I might scare them off if they see that. This question comes from Raymond Miller Jr. from
Our
Burton,
buddy
Ohio.
Raymond.
Ray Miller. Boy, he's entertaining, isn't it? Isn't he? We get texts from him on almost a daily basis.
He had a
the week.
question about a king buck. He had a question about a king
Yeah.
buck on his property this week, I think.
Well, the king buck has been making lots of appearances on my text anyway. Everybody's got a king buck. But so Raymond says, "Hi, Don and Terry. I love the podcast and appreciate that you have made it available for us Amish to listen to by phone. I am also looking forward to working with both of you at the master class in Middlefield, Ohio at our place. My question is regarding a recent question about splitting up your food plot into 13 quarter-acre plots to keep bucks from seeing into them versus one big plot. Wouldn't a mature buck looking for does take one pass on the downwind side anyway, no matter if that plot is one big plot or 13 small ones? Second question. I have heard and read about social pressure and how bucks don't socialize with does and does will fight does and blah, 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 and on and on and on. However, my brother Aiden and I's property that you consulted on and where the master course students will get to walk, we have a large 8-acre food plot with corn, beans, clover, fruit trees, and deadly dozen, and we watch that plot fill with 30 plus deer feeding during all phases of the season. Does, bucks, and fawns coming from all directions and all mingled together, and we have yet to see any social pressure in that big plot in 3 years. However, we do have a few half-acre kill plots back in the cover where we have seen some social pressure among does if it was tight quarters. Why do you think we see this in small plots but not in our big plot? And by splitting up big food plots, are we just maybe creating social pressure? Also, the ones promoting this social stress idea are the same ones that are against large plots and summer food. Your thoughts on it all? Thank you both, and God bless, Ray. Well, Ray brings up a great point. Mature bucks use their nose way more than their eyes, and you know, they run the downwind edge of bedding cover. My favorite way to hunt them rutting bucks is just get on the downwind edge of bedding cover, and they'll do the same thing with a food source. It's not like they stick their head out and look around and no does. There's a lot of things that I think get promoted on the internet and such that they may sound good in human terms, but humans are not deer, and deer use their nose the way we use our eyes. Um, you know, Ray talks about a bunch of deer coming into a big plot, and there's no social pressure. That's because that plot's big enough; they can have some distance between themselves and different groups of deer. So on my place, there's been many, many, many countless times where I've seen multiple mature bucks, and I'm not talking 3-year-olds or 4-year-olds. I'm talking 5, 6, 7-year-old bucks in a plot together at the same time, even during November during the rut, and they're fine with each other. They know the pecking order. It's like going into when you're young, in your early 20s, mid 20s, or whatever, and you go into the bar. Well, crap, you know who the toughest guy in the bar is. You don't go up and, you know, pull his chin hairs or anything. You leave him the heck alone. And you go to the other side of the bar, do your thing. And it's pretty much the same way with these deer. They know the pecking order. They know to leave that buck alone or whatever. But I see it all the time. It's that people come up with these ridiculous theories that, I mean, I've been in the woods for 45 plus years, and many of those years, I took off the entire month of November from my job and hunted every single day. So I've got a lot of experience in the deer woods, and I hear people talking about things that I have never, ever, ever seen. And the list is long. The doe factory is just one thing that doesn't make sense to me, but the list is long. And people, I just wish they would they would consider the source of the material that they're listening to. And here's another example. Just this weekend, I was reading a social media post from a guy, and he's actually a guy I respect, but he was talking about killing early season bucks, and he was saying, "Don't listen to this. Forget about the October lull. Forget about the advice to not hunt October mornings. Forget about this. Forget about that." And I didn't want to disrespect the guy, so I didn't say anything. But I'm thinking to myself, okay, he's telling everybody to go hunt October mornings. How many mature bucks has this guy killed on an October morning? I bet you can probably count on one finger, and probably don't even need one finger. It's one thing to give advice, and it's another thing totally to have the experience to back up that advice. And if this guy had went out and killed 3 or 4 really good mature bucks on October mornings, then he's got some credibility to back up his statement. But so much of the garbage that's on the internet is put out by people that have absolutely no backing to back up the point they're trying to make. A lot of it is just repeating something that somebody else has said. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. I fully believe when it comes to hunting mature bucks, more than half of the information on the internet is bad information, more than half. So you really gotta filter through it, and the best way to do that is consider the source where it's coming from. I left you speechless, Terry.
I don't have anything to add with that. So this week's Biofarm segment, Don Bailey joined us, and he didn't actually even talk about a property a little bit, but I think it's a perfect place, and we didn't plan this. Real estate is similar to land consulting in the food plot industry, where people pop up and become an expert in it. And by no means do we ever want to tell people not to chase their dreams, but when you're trying to partner with a real estate agent, you want somebody that's been around rural properties for a long time and has that expertise. And Don just wanted to talk a little bit about that this week and what Biofarm is, how they got started. So we're going to play that bit just right now and be back with another question to end the podcast tonight.
Well, hey, everyone. This is Terry Peer with the Chasing Giants podcast for the Biofarm.com property segment of the week. And I have Don Bailey on tonight, and we're going to do something a little bit different, and that's talk a little bit about Biofarm as an organization. Don, thanks for being on the podcast again.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
So we talk about properties every week, but this week let's talk a little bit about the services that you guys provide and maybe some things that people don't realize you bring to the table as they're shopping for a real estate partner.
Yeah, Terry, we started Biofarm 16 years ago simply because there wasn't anybody that was really, really educated in real property. I shouldn't say anybody wasn't educated, but the most people that were dealing with it, they really would rather have dealt with homes and homes in town. So we started Biofarm Land and Auction Company basically just to deal with the real properties.
Mm-hmm.
And we have and will continue. We want to make a commission, of course. We want to get paid, of course. But more than that, we really do figure ourselves as a service business. And, if someone's got a question, they're not ready to sell or they're not ready to buy, or they're buying from someone else, and something doesn't make sense to them, we encourage them to call us, and we'll give them our 2 cents, knowing that we're not going to get any revenue out of it. But it's not all about just getting paid for every deal. It's about the service.
When we have a career that's something that we really enjoy, that we feel like, we're adding value to something, and it's our career and our livelihood, and those things all align together, I think that's a pretty special thing versus just having a normal job that you hate going to every day.
And that, to some people that haven't experienced it, that may sound cheesy, but that is truly the gospel.
You get mad at me for teeing you up like this, but Don and I deal with this all the time in the food plot industry, and then Don deals with it obviously a lot in the consulting business. But it seems like everybody's popping up with all these businesses and chasing their dreams, and that's fine. We don't want to discourage anyone for pursuing a career in real estate or, selling food plot seed or even land consulting. But at the same time, as consumers who are looking for those services, we just have to be prepared. So what does Biofarm bring to the table outside of experience of, I think you just said 16 years? What are some of the things that kind of set you guys apart?
We deal in an amazing number of counties, Terry. We don't just concentrate on one area. I'm actually licensed in Illinois, Indiana, and Missouri. And we physically are visiting them counties and them townships on a regular basis. So we do keep rather than just read their sales reports, we do keep a honest to goodness idea of values. And we of course have access to 5 different programs that we subscribe to be able to pull up not only the topo maps, but the inside of topo maps of soil types and so on and so forth. And just like someone buying a hunting piece, the soil type's a soil type. It doesn't make any difference. But actually it does. If one hill of it or one side of it is a lot better of a soil type, that's where they'd be better off putting their food plots. So we pass that information on to them that if you're going to put a food plot, it might be better in the southwest corner just because the soils are a lot better, and year in and year out, your food plot will do better.
Mm-hmm.
Along with that, we have numerous agents, and if I don't know of something in a particular area, I'm one of the owners and the managing broker of the entire Biofarm, but if I don't know of something in a particular area, I have a lot of people that I can physically reach out to. We see on a regular basis, Terry, and it's just the world we're in, new companies popping up, and a company may pop up and not just it just developed 2 months ago, and every one of the land agents are land specialists. I'm a fourth generation farmer, and I've physically been with dirt all my life, and I've helped start Biofarm 16 years ago. I still don't really consider myself a land specialist, but uh, it's just like the consulting business on you guys' end. I just hope that clients and people have the wherewithal to understand that you and Don know what you're doing. And the thing that stands out is you can listen to you guys talk. I don't care who you are. You can listen to you guys talk and realize that you know what you're talking about. And that's, to me, that's priceless, Terry. That truly is.
Well, we appreciate that, and you guys have been loyal to us since the very beginning and helped us get started in this thing. And can you believe that before the end of the year, we'll have over 1 million unique listeners that have listened to this podcast? Is that not crazy?
That is simply crazy. Who would have thought when you guys started?
Just a few guys talking about hunting and venting about politics every once in a while has blown up into this, and you guys have been a big part of it. But I know this probably won't be part of what you'll talk about, but one of the things Don and I try to bring to the table is integrity. And we don't just get bought and sold. We promote and we work with and we're friends with, and we try to help those who we believe in. And I can't say enough good about the folks at Biofarm and the people you all stand up with. It meant a lot a couple of weeks ago for you to say how much you guys were involved with the local 4-H chapter down at the state fair and giving back in your communities. I can't say enough about that. So not only thank you for the partnership, but thank you for doing business the right way and treating people the right way. Let's have you on next week and tee up another property. I know, how did those auctions go? We had a couple auctions that either they're getting ready to go off or they just got off. Everything gone pretty well with those?
Everything's going really well. Yeah, got several more coming up. But yeah, everything's going extremely well.
All right, we'll tee a couple of those properties up next week. For those of you who are interested in learning more about Biofarm, the agents, and the services that they provide, please visit biofarm.com or call 1-800-443-1998. That's 1-800-443-1998. Even if you don't see what you're looking for on there, give them a call and they'll be able to put you in touch or maybe have some ideas for something you're looking for. Don, thanks for your time, buddy. We appreciate you being on.
Thank you for inviting me this evening, Terry. Have a good evening.
Take care.
All right, Don. Well, we're going to cut listener submitted questions a little bit short tonight. And I think it's only appropriate, since you used Ray's question, that you have to use Aiden's question. We're going to end on this one tonight. And this is a really good one. These guys are from Ohio and can supplemental feed. And I think this is a great question. We haven't teed up too much on the podcast, so I'm interested to hear your opinion on Aiden's question.
Yeah, and as Ray mentioned in the last question, Ray and Aiden are both from the Middlefield, Ohio area where they own a business, and that's where the February 4th master class in Ohio is going to be held at their business. And I've consulted with these guys for probably, 5 years now, and I've probably looked at half a dozen properties for them. I think they become believers when the first time I was there and seen the difference it made on that first property. But
great guys, though.
Fantastic guys, and they've become not just clients but really good friends. And so we've had Ray's question. Now we'll answer Aiden's. Aiden says, "Hi Don and Terry, love the podcast. If you had to choose between supplemental feeding or food plot program, which one is going to enhance antler growth more? If one has a very good food plot program, are they wasting their money with supplemental feeding? And do you think if you could have legally fed on your farm, it could have enhanced Mel and Smokey and others? Thanks, Don and Terry." Well, Aiden, without a doubt, I think the food plot program is way more important than the supplemental feeding. And the reason for it is I think the deer, any deer, is probably going to get a bigger share of his nutrition from that food plot than he is from sticking his face in a feeder. And especially when we start talking about mature bucks, I mean, you put a feeder on your property and during certain times of the year, if a buck has grown up around them feeders, yeah, he may feed in them, but there's going to be times where weeks will go by before that buck is sticking his face in that feeder, even though he's feeding every day. Um, the supplemental feeder is basically just an opportunity to provide those nutrients that the deer may not be able to get from their natural diet or from the food plot. So if I could supplemental feed, I definitely would here in Illinois. I do on my Ohio property. Do I think it would have made a difference in Smoky and Mel? To be honest, if it would have been minimal. Probably, and I'm just throwing out a guess, and it's nothing more than a guess. But I would say if I was allowed to supplemental feed, it would have probably made no more at very max, maybe 5 inches of difference, and I don't even know if it would have done that. What I would do in places where I can supplemental feed, like Ohio, where my other property's at, I think one of the things that land managers really miss, if you're a really serious land manager, that feeder is an opportunity for you to worm your deer, to use a cattle wormer in your feed, and clean them deer up from any parasites they might have, and especially in the winter months, you're setting that deer up for the upcoming antler growing season. So
Overall gut health.
exactly. You're putting up probiotics in through the feed too to get that correct bacteria in the deer's gut and help them to better digest their food sources, whatever they may be. But there's some things that you can do with supplemental feeding that you cannot do with food plots. But if I had to choose between the two, hands down, without a doubt, I would go with a good food plot program.
I think I think this question would be really interesting to ask Dr. Strickland, specifically with Mel and Smokey. And probably, if I was guessing, what Dr. Strickland would say is that the bigger difference you probably would have made, if any, would have been in their mother when she was having the supplemental feeding with fetal programming versus after the buck was already born. He talks a lot about raising that ceiling, and you're only limited to how much you can raise the ceiling after the fetal programming. So it's a great question. But I think it's called supplemental feeding for a reason. It's supplement, just like supplemental vitamins. You don't just go and get a Centrum multivitamin and that's all you eat. That's an additional supplement across your diet. And I'm lucky that I'm in a state that allows me to do it all year long. But I agree with you 100%. You can even see when the deer consume more versus when they consume less out of the feed all year long. In Kentucky, I can leave it out all year except during turkey season. And obviously that's because there's a gap in something when they consume more versus when they consume less. So I think it's a great question that probably could even go a whole lot deeper with Dr. Strickland on. We might have to tee that one back up for another conversation when Dr. Strickland's on.
Well, I can tell you that Dr. Strickland is not a huge fan of supplemental feeding. He thinks you can provide everything, and I'm sure he's right. He knows as much about whitetails as anyone. He thinks you can, through the natural food sources as well as food plots, you can provide a deer everything they need.
With diversity. Yeah, I mean that's
Right.
the key is
Diversity's
you
huge.
gotta have the diversity. He talked a
Right.
lot about in our master class, talked a lot about, watching deer eat these twigs or some plant that was off on the edge of the field, and then they did a tissue analysis on that, and that was one thing at a micronutrient level that the deer weren't getting in the plant at that time of the year. So deer's gonna balance out what he needs. The thing about it is, though, you don't want a deer leaving your farm to get what that thing is that he needs. And unfortunately, we're raising a lot of hunters that only know how to hunt over a bait pile, not be a woodsman. And I think that gets into another whole can of worms as it relates to supplemental feeding. And I think that's a different conversation, is baiting versus supplemental feeding, that we've talked about multiple times. But great question, both from Ray and Aiden. We look forward to being on their property in February and doing live podcasts. So I agreed to come up there and be there with these guys for these 2 master classes. They better have that place packed for this podcast when we do it live.
Well, we've already got several reservations for each podcast, so or for each master class. So I know that place is probably going to be one of the bigger master classes we do.
So it's up to Ray and Aiden to fill that place, but we look forward to spending more time with our friends. They always make me smile. I can't always respond because they come during the day and I'll be in a meeting, or one day something came in about the king buck and I was actually presenting a presentation at work and I just started laughing and lost my train of thought. It was pretty funny, but we appreciate their friendship. They're great guys, big supporters of Lester's Feet, and really covet their friendship. So with that, we've ran a little long today, and we'll circle back next week. I'm going to be in downtown Chicago, and who's going to be your special guest next week for this podcast?
We're going to have Bobby Worthington on next week and get his buck report. See what he's got up his sleeve for this season.
All right. Well, I do want to make one quick little thing. I hope you've made people mad because you're charging more for for your consulting. I'm overwhelmed with the number of text message and instant messages from people saying, "Did you see anything hunting tonight?" I think I had over 100 messages last night asking if I even went. So I apologize if I don't respond to those kind of messages. I assure you that when I see something, I'll put it out there. And when something's down and has a hole in it, everybody will know soon enough. So I apologize. There's no way I can keep up with these messages, but I do truly appreciate the army of people that's got our back. It means a lot.
Yeah, we got a lot of fans, and we just appreciate. We couldn't do what we do if we didn't have you guys. So appreciate the support. Please keep it up.
All right. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks for your support.
God bless everyone.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by Osseo Camo, Biofarm Real Estate Company, 360 Hunting Blinds, Victory Chevrolet, Real World Wildlife Products, Matthews Archery, Novix Tree Stands, Gingerich Tree Farm, WildlifeFarming.com, Quiet Cat, and Vortex Optics. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.